Witness number 80 can be found on page 5 of your materials. The witness will only be on the line. The video will not be showing. Okay. Madam Witness, can you hear me?
Bale.
I can hear you.
The chairman is going to swear you in right now.
Sal.
Madam Witness, thank you very much for attending to testify. Would you repeat after me, please? I do solemnly declare that I will speak the truth.
Manras.
I solemnly declare to tell the truth,
The whole truth and nothing but
the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Madam Witness. Counsel, for the prosecution, we'll ask you some questions, and there may be then questions from the panel afterwards.
Bale, befem.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Witness. Can you please tell us what your knowledge
خواهش میکنم.
and what happened during the Aban protests that has brought you here today?
First of all, I would like to convey my greetings. I am the mother of one of those who was killed in the November. My son was 18 years old. He was a student. We come from a very religious family. We truly believed in this regime, in the system. On 16th of November 2009, it was about 3 p.m. when my son contacted me. I had tried to call him before, so he responded to my missed call and he said, did he call me? And he said, Mother, I'm near home, I'm coming home, but the streets are really packed, do not leave home, but I'm very close to home. It was some 20 minutes later and I really started getting worried. So I contacted him again, yet there was no answer. I tried in vain a few times. And after 8 and 9 times, some gentleman answered his phone and said, oh, your son has been hit and we have brought him to a hospital. And I told my husband, his grandfather, and we went from hospital to hospital to try and find him because the hospital was not, the name of it wasn't specified. We searched among the injured, among those killed, and until 2:30 in the morning, we couldn't find him, dead or alive. It was 6 in the morning, and from 5 a.m. I'd started searching everywhere with my husband. It was about 6 a.m. that one of the hospitals, and I had showed, by the way, pictures of my son to everyone, all personnel, all hospitals. So somebody from a hospital recognized my son's photographs and said, yes, he was among the injured. He had received a bullet in the head. And I said, where is he now? Where should I go to? He said, go to the security department. I went to the security and I told them my name. And he very rudely, without any even giving me any explanation, I didn't know my son had died. He looked at the ID and he threw the ID and all the documents and said, go to Behesht Zahra Cemetery. I almost faint. I said, what do you mean, Behesht Zahra ceremony? He said, your son has been killed. I said, whereabouts in Behesht Zahra? He said, go and find it. I said, what do you mean? Is my husband lost? My son is not lost. Where do you mean, go and find him in Behesht Zahra Cemetery? So we headed for Behesht Cemetery. So I can say for 3 days and nights, I was with him, with my son's friends, my family, his grandfather. We searched everywhere in the cemetery and could not find him. And after 3 days and through a relative, they told me he is among those unidentified in Kahrizak. So we went to Kahrizak and And I have to mention, by the way, that my son had all his documents on him when he was going to hospital, when he was being taken to hospital. So in Kahrizak, I said, why is he among those who have not been identified? And they said, no, because he wasn't carrying any documents. Whereas the hospital security had given me the documents they'd found on my son. So why was he why was I told he was unidentified? And then before giving me the body of they said, first we need to have a meeting before giving you, to decide whether or not to give you the body. And that took about 4 hours. After 4 hours, they forced us to give a pledge not to talk to anyone, not to give a ceremony, and do not inform anyone of how my son was killed. And we gave this pledge. And they said, should you do otherwise, we will take your son's body from his grave. And I said I wanted him to be buried in peace. And so I did not do anything. We buried my son, and during the ceremony, little ceremony, there were 6 or 7 plainclothes officers. One of my relatives became very angry and said, and started shouting. And one of those plainclothes officers, according to him, he said, my relative said, when I was shouting, he showed me his Colt, and told me to shut up. And it was 4 days after my son had been killed that they came from the intelligence to our home and said, your son was not killed by the state forces, but he was killed by a number of terrorists. He was not killed by the government forces, and they had, because the arms they had used were did not belong to the military, and I said, how can you tell me that the weapons did not belong to the system? He said, no, we were not allowed to shoot anyone above the hip, so whoever shot your son was not one of us. And they said, so we deem your son a martyr of the November protests. And anyway, some time passed, and they said, oh, you can legally put martyr on his tombstone. I didn't accept. I said, I will not do that, because I said, I no longer believe in the Islamic system in Iran. And as I told you earlier, we were very, very religious, and we'd really believed in this Islamic system. But I no longer accept them. I no longer have any respect for the Islamic system, or whatever they say, the Islamic Republic. That's it. That's all I had to say.
Thank you, Madam Witness. I have a few questions for you that are clarification questions. We have in front of us the death certificate. Can you tell us on the certificate what was written as the cause of death?
They said he'd lost a lot of blood, and his skull was crushed, and that he was killed by weapons, and he was killed not in a war, and it was not declared a war scene.
In your statement, and it's not reflected in the death certificate based on what you said, you mentioned that when you saw his body, that his body was completely opened. Yeah.
Sorry, yes, I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten to tell you this, and those who were washing his body, they told me, because my son had a bit of a belly, and they said they had emptied everything in his stomach, and they said it was very, very clear that my son. He was, he had a very good fit body, and you could see that his stomach had been totally emptied. And when we filed a complaint, and we said why. Why was there an autopsy, and why did they open up my son? And they said it's, firstly, they told us he had a card saying that he could donate his body parts. I said no, as far as I know, my son did not have such a card saying he's willing to donate his body parts. Then they changed their mind and said, no, it was an autopsy. We officially had to do an autopsy. I said, well, he was shot in the head. Why did you open his stomach? He said, no, we do that in general to everyone. We had to just have performed the autopsy, and your son was also, and we did the same to your son.
Did they ever show you the card where supposedly he said he would donate his body parts?
No.
No, they never showed me anything. I was really upset that, and I thought, why? And in fact, they were very insulting, and that said, don't stop complaining. We performed an autopsy on everyone, not just your son.
In the latter part of your statement, you talk about the governor who came to your son's grandfather's house. Did you ever interact with the governor at all?
Yes, he came to our home, and they said to my husband, and he said, if he raised his hand, and he said, first they said your son's hand, what is in his pocket, had his hand been outside his pocket, we would not be here. And I said, what do you mean? He said his hand was in his pocket. Had he not had his hand in his pocket, we wouldn't have acted like that. My son was a passerby.
Because your son had his hand in his pocket, that's why he died?
He was a passerby, and they told me he was a passerby with his hand in his pocket. And he put his hand up, and he said, had his hand been up like this, and he showed his hand, raising his hand. In other words, he was telling me that your son was innocent because his hand was in his pocket. And there are films, I haven't seen films, and they said that is how we established that your son was innocent, because we found his hand was in his pocket. And even the head of the command said, I am the one who said that your son should be deemed a martyr. And when I said, please prove to me that my son was shot by terrorists, as you say, please prove it to me. He was silent. He didn't say anything. So I said, why can you not prove it to me? He said, we cannot tell you anything more. And I said, your silence is a sign that it was done by you lot. And again, he was silent. And I said, yes, you have nothing to say because you are the one who killed my son.
When you met with the governor of Tehran, was there anybody else with him or her?
Yes, from the Martyrs Foundation, there was an individual. The commanders of IRGC, the intelligence, all of them came to my house together.
I have no further questions, but the panel may have questions for you. Mr. Chair.
I don't think the panel has any questions. Sorry, yes, they do. Justice Yakub?
بله بله بفهم.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Um,
خوش.
Thank you for giving evidence, and I'm sorry to have to ask you these extra questions. But you say that you were a believer in the Islamic State. Are you sure that your son was too?
بله بله بله.
Yes, he was. He believed in the Islamic State and he even took part in religious ceremonies. He believed in the system, in the state.
Did you gain the impression that they regretted that they killed him?
بظاهر بله.
Apparently, yes.
To understand the martyr idea a little bit more, the word for me means it is good to be a martyr, but you said no, and I'm trying to understand it a little bit.
نه نه من به خود.
Well, I told them that a Muslim killed by another Muslim is not called a martyr. I wouldn't accept that. In my own country, my son was killed. How could he be a martyr? They talk about Quran, about Islam, about Prophet. What Quran? What Islam? In what religion a Muslim kills another Muslim? So my son is not a martyr. That's what I say. I say he is not a martyr. I don't even accept any martyr in this regime because they killed my son. How can they call my son a martyr now? So I won't accept it.
Okay. Then one more thing. You're not a believer in the Islamic Republic anymore, but I suppose you are still a
من
Muslim.
خیلی اعتقاد داشتم. اسلام رو قبول.
I believe in Islam, but I don't believe in the regime anymore. What can I say? A regime in which a Muslim kills another Muslim, that's not a Islamic regime. Where in Quran has this been written? Where in Islam you find such a thing? I won't accept it. I believe in my religion, but not in the system anymore.
You and your son think about, if you talked about it, about the petrol price, the fuel price increase. We are told that it went up a great deal, and many people were unhappy about it. How did you feel about it?
My son was saying that poor young people, poor people, how are they going to carry on living? Many of my fellow schoolmates and friends, they are suffering. I have a friend who's seen my phone and he was unable to buy a similar one. My son was always sympathizing with the other people. He was saying that the prices have increased and people are not able to cope. But he did not go out to protest for the increase of the fuel prices, but he was always mentioning that this would cause hardship to other people.
One last question. Did other believers that you know of in the Islamic State, and I suppose you had contact with many of them,
بله.
were many believers in the Islamic State unhappy about the fuel price increase because they thought it would be bad for poor people?
Nobody was happy with the increase in the fuel prices. not now nor then. If you ask people at the time, nobody was happy with it. I was not happy either. My son was not happy with it. Nobody was happy with it. Even the young people who went out and protested, they did not deserve to be shot at and to be killed. Nobody was happy with the price hike. The people are dying and starving in this regime, in this country.
Sorry, I have no further questions, and sorry to have troubled you. And thank you, Chair.
خواهش می‌کنم.
No problem.
Do you have any?
No, thank you, Madam Witness, and we're sorry for your loss.
Thank you very much, Madam Witness, for attending to give evidence for the tribunal. We appreciate the difficulty and the courage you've shown. Thank you.
خیلی مرسی خدا
Thank you very much and goodbye.